Hello and welcome back to Help Exam Learning Resources. Now let's talk about bounded context in depth of strategic design. So we need to segregate domain models using strategic design pattern called bounded context. We discussed correct one subdomain equal to one bounded context. Each bounded context has its own domain model. Correct. Just to understand, like it has its own domain model, its own ubiquitous language. So that is what each bounded context has. Each of these contexts has its own. When you implement it, when you come out with your source code, it would have its own API, its own database, or you can say in the same schema, if you want to keep it, the collection of tables would be created and separate user manual for this. Basically you would be creating domain and subdomain is equal to problem space we have discussed, and bounded context is a solution space of that basically. And bounded context is a semantic contextual boundary. This means that within the boundary each component of the software model has a specific meaning and does specific thing. Let me tell you what exactly it means here. So let's say if I talk about order, correct, and this order is for online, correct, and another order which you received it is an offline order, correct, in the sense like customer came in the restaurant and want to put an order and eat there. So when this is an online order, so object of customer is same in the both the place, correct. You would create a customer object in, let's assume it basically, correct. And now when you one customer is putting an online order, then it means what is important here, phone number is important or mobile number, his address is important, correct. That is very critical, and whatever the order he place it. But when a customer is an offline, your phone number is not that critical, correct. Your address is customer address is not critical. Other stuff order is critical, correct, what he placed on the order, correct. That is correct. So that is the difference, you understand, like this is a one bounded context, online order, and offline order is another bounded context. You have a customer object for this, you have customer object for this, both are customer object, but the meaning or the attribute of the customer object changes when the bounded context changes. If you're talking about online order, in this context phone and address is very important. Without that you can't complete the online order. But when you talk about the offline order, then phone number and address is not that critical, because you can or serve the customer in the restaurant itself. So that is what the bounded context, the things changes when, and even the name of the, or you can say the object is same, but the values inside the object or attributes in the object is different across the bounded context. So that is the difference you need to understand. So a bounded context is semantic contextual boundary. This means that within the boundary, each component of the software model has a specific meaning. You can does specific things here, correct? So that is what it's a difference here. So, and let's say in case of example, another restaurant example only, when we talk about the customer here, so the customer which is coming here to the restaurant and eating it. But another model, this restaurant has a inventory management, correct. Inventory management would have a customer object is a different here basically, correct. In this case customer would be the restaurant itself or another restaurant or something kind of thing, basically that could be the difference. So here this is a different bounded context, the meaning has changes across this basically. A customer is bad example, let me take an order as an example. So order for a customer here and order here, it's a different, because here the order is coming from the basically a different vendor or something. Here the in inventory management, and but in restaurant management the order is a what customer who has ordered it. So meaning changes, even the order is the same thing when we domain expert talk it. So you need to differentiate, you need to find the boundaries between, like this is a different subdomain, this is a different subdomain. That is what the bounded context you need to find it. A bounded context is where model is implemented. You implement your model and you will have a separate software artifacts created for each bounded context, correct. So if you have an for example here inventory is a separate bounded context, and or order offline is a different bounded context, order online different. You may have a three different software artifacts created for this three use cases, correct. So that is what it bounded context. The bounded context should hold closely all concepts that are core to the strategic initiative and push out all others. You need to focus on only core. So here you see inventory management is not a core here. So you can keep it outside. You can buy third part from third party. Yeah, this one. But here order offline and online order, this is core part of core business. So that should be as part of your core business has to be. So that is what you should be able to find it out. Employing a bounded context forces us to answer the question, what is my core? Correct? That is what you need to. Each bounded context should have its own database, API, user manual, which we discussed. Basics of bounded context. When bounded context is being developed is a key strategic initiative, it is called a core domain, because this is core of your business. Source code, you develop your solution in the bounded context. When you develop your software or code, it would be in bounded context. Both main source code and test source code should remain together for a one bounded context. Integration, you produce a code in your solution space that support integration with other bounded contexts as well. So you should be able to integrate with other bounded contexts. Now for simplicity and to understand better, let's take an example. When you are working with the e-commerce application, correct, which is very popular nowadays. So we have a different context here, correct, but the object is same. Like every context we are talking about customer object. In the sales context, when something is sales is trying to market this their product, the social interest of customer matters. So you must have one this attribute when you define a customer object in the sales context. Otherwise they would not be able to market this. If you're talking about support context, object is again still customer, but when you're supporting a customer, his purchase history must, you should provide the detail, correct, while defining the bounded context. So this is a must. Billing context, when you talk about for this customer billing context, again the customer object, but here the billing address is critical in this case. Without billing address, what billing context cannot be supported. Order context, when customer put an order, then shipping address become a very critical. So this is what the difference is. You need to understand how this bounded context is defined, what objects inside that has a meaning, kind of thing. Even all four has a customer as an object, but for every or in every case the customer object behavior is a different, basically, correct. Similarly, you can have a building, you are building a house, so your sub module or bounded context would be what? Master bedroom, living room, garage, dining room. These all become your bounded context, correct? And what inside this it needed, that changes the behavior and etc. Correct. So when you define a bounded context or subdomain, so subdomain is equal to one bounded context. Subdomain is a sub part of your overall business domain. You can think of a subdomain as a representing single logical domain model. Subdomains can be used logically break your whole business domain so that you can understand your problem space on a large complex project, which we have already discussed this stuff. So I'm just repeating it. Another way to think subdomain is that it is a clear area of expertise, assuming that it is responsible for providing a solutions to a core area of your business. So we have discussed this thing. The subdomain also has a greater lesser strategic significance to your business, so you need to find it out. Okay, let me now move further. So when you define your subdomain, you need to understand subdomain can be three different types. We have discussed some part of this, but let me repeat this here. Core subdomain, which is your main core business logic, and basically where your entire most of the investment is going on. So you must have a well defined data model for then committing significant resources in this part only, and carefully crafting the ubiquitous language. What is ubiquitous language? We'll discuss in the next session. Is an explicit bounded context. It is an example of the, it is where the organization needs to invest most liberally in the software. Like for example, in case of the restaurant, the core domain is a restaurant business, correct. Sub supporting domain, you may want to consider outsource this kind of bounded context to avoid mistaking it for something strategically distinguishing and thus investing heavily in it. So you should not heavily invest on this compared to this one. Basically still you can develop this, but to avoid a heavy investment compared to this and do this. This is it's still important software module as we discuss as but not as important as core. This is modeling situation that calls the custom development because of the shelf product is does not exist for my requirement. Like whatever reporting if I wanted to generate, or if I wanted to do my own inventory management, then I can develop this, basically, correct. So this is all depend whether I wanted to buy it or whether I wanted to build it. That decision needs to be taken. Then you define out generic subdomain, which is everywhere used basically in most of the software you would be using, like identity and access management. Logging is another example. Then JDBC library, correct? Which you would not be creating this stuff, correct? Like this is already available in the market. Even open source is available. Use that, and don't invest your resources, money in that generic subdomain. When discussing the project where domain driven design is being employed, we are most likely to discussing the core domain only. Always try to map one subdomain to one bounded context we have discussed. Now next section we'll cover the ubiquitous language, what does it mean and kind of thing. So thanks, I hope you understood what is the bounded context it means and how it relates to a subdomain. So that is part of your strategic tool. First part, you must come out with your bounded context after discussion with a domain expert. Thank you, I'm stopping now.